My mom's new therapist boyfriend moved into our house 2 months after Dad disappeared, started erasing every trace of him, and tried to have me institutionalized when I found evidence he was involved. So I used Dad's hidden investigation files to destroy his entire life. When my mom married Dr. Brian, I was 15. Dad had been gone for 2 months, disappeared on a fishing trip, the body was never found. Mom collapsed when they told her. Her knees just gave out in the kitchen, and I had to catch her before she hit her head on the counter. When I started smoking cigarettes, she didn't even care. It was the only way I could handle the search teams without losing my mind. At least we have each other, became our mantra for the cold, sleepless nights no one else seemed to understand. Until one Tuesday, when Mom came home different. Her hair was brushed. She was wearing real clothes instead of Dad's old college sweatshirt. "This is Dr. Brian," she said, gesturing to the man beside her. "He's been helping me process everything." Dr. Brian had this practiced smile, the kind that didn't reach his eyes, salt and pepper beard, expensive watch, the kind of guy who probably had a motivational podcast. He shook my hand with both of his, holding on for too long. "Your mother's told me so much about you, Megan. I'm here to help your family heal." At first, it was just dinners. He'd show up with Chinese food or pizza, claiming Mom had forgotten to eat again and needed someone to remind her. Then he started staying later, using Dad's coffee mug, the one I'd bought him that said, "World's okayest fisherman." One night, I found him in Dad's chair watching the game. "Oh, your mom said it was okay," he explained when he saw my face. "Sometimes familiar routines help with grief processing." Mom backed him up immediately. "Doctor, Brian is helping us heal, Megan. I need you to be more welcoming." 2 weeks after that first dinner, his car was in Dad's spot every morning. He'd moved into Dad's study, boxing up his fishing trophies and work files because shrines to the deceased prevent healthy grieving. Mom started laughing again, except it was at Dr. Brian's jokes, not Dad's favorite movies. She wore makeup to the grocery store and cooked elaborate meals, but they were all Dr. Brian's favorites. Mediterranean food Dad would have hated. I came home one day to find her loading Dad's clothes into garbage bags. "Doctor," Brian says, "holding on to them prevents closure," she explained, not meeting my eyes. I helped her pack them, pretending I was okay with it, pretending I didn't smell Dad's flannel shirt one last time before shoving it in the donation pile. Mom was always in grief therapy sessions now, too busy to notice I was failing algebra or that I'd stopped eating lunch. She missed 3 parent-teacher conferences because Dr. Brian had scheduled breakthrough sessions. I went to school events alone, making excuses for why my mom couldn't make it while Dr. Brian's BMW sat in our driveway. Late at night, I'd text Dad's phone. I knew it was at the bottom of Lake Harrison, but that didn't matter. "Hey Dad, things are really weird right now, but we love you." Always delivered, never a response. Sigh. Dr. Brian even tried to take me fishing once, using Dad's gear, driving Dad's truck to Dad's secret spot on the lake. Called it therapeutic bonding. I threw up before we even got in the boat and he never asked again. Everything exploded on Dad's birthday. I'd planned a memorial service at Lake Harrison. Nothing fancy, just his fishing buddies and some family wanting to scatter the ashes we didn't even have. Mom shut it down immediately. Dr. Brian has planned a moving forward ceremony at his wellness center that day. It's what we need. So there I was, begging my mother to honor my dad on his birthday, when her face turned cold. "Your father is gone, Megan. This obsession with the lake is unhealthy." When I raised my voice, Dr. Brian stepped in. "Your father probably wanted to disappear. Some men can't handle the pressure of family life." Mom said nothing, just nodded like he'd made a valid point. I didn't even argue, just walked up to Katie's bedroom and cuddled her pillow while I cried my eyes out. If you've ever experienced raw and intense grief, then you know about the intense hunger you feel to uncover more about what they were feeling and thinking before they died. And that hunger is what led me to come across a spare key to break into the study. I just wanted something, anything of his to keep. And that's how I found a box marked "Shred," full of Dad's credit card statements. My hands shook as I read them. There were charges from after he disappeared, after his boat was found empty. I waited until 2 a.m. hit before running to Uncle Pete's house, Dad's best friend who lived 3 miles away. He answered the door in boxers, baseball bat in hand, then his face went white when he saw me. "Megan, your mom said you were at boarding school." His wife, Aunt Sharon, appeared behind him, and her face went from confused to terrified. They practically shoved me into their kitchen, voices dropping to whispers. Uncle Pete kept running his hands through his hair, the way Dad used to when he was stressed. "There's something about that last night," he finally said. "I promised your mom I wouldn't, but you need to know." Uncle Pete pulled up security footage from his Chevron station on his laptop, his hands shaking as he clicked through the files. The timestamp showed 10:47 p.m., and there it was, Dad's truck pulling in for gas. My heart hammered as I leaned closer to the screen. Someone was in the passenger seat, but the angle made it impossible to see who. Uncle Pete zoomed in, enhanced the image, but the figure remained a shadow. Aunt Sharon handed me a manila folder, her eyes red-rimmed. Inside were credit card statements she'd been collecting, statements that made my stomach drop. A charge at Moonlight Motel, 200 miles inland, dated 3 days after Dad's boat was found. My hands trembled as I traced the transaction with my finger. This wasn't possible. Dad was supposed to be at the bottom of Lake Harrison. The kitchen door burst open. Mom stood there in her pajamas, hair wild. Dr. Brian behind her in his perfectly pressed clothes, even at this ungodly hour. She rushed forward and grabbed my shoulders, shaking me. Her breath came in gasps as she looked between me and Uncle Pete, then at the papers spread across the kitchen table. Dr. Brian stayed by the door, his phone glowing in his hand. Through the window, I watched his breath fog the glass in short, rhythmic puffs. Something about the pattern made my skin crawl. It reminded me of something, but I couldn't place what. Neighbors started gathering on Uncle Pete's lawn, drawn by Mom's car screeching into the driveway and her frantic pounding on the door moments before. Mrs. Henderson from next door clutched her robe, whispering to her husband. The Johnsons stood by their mailbox, phones out. The words erupted from me before I could stop them. I pointed at Dr. Brian, my voice cracking from cigarettes and exhaustion. The accusation hung in the air as everyone turned to stare. Mom's face crumpled, and she pulled me against her chest, speaking over my head to the gathering crowd about how I'd been struggling since Dad died, how I'd had a breakdown when Grandma passed last year and couldn't accept that either. Aunt Sharon shifted uncomfortably, glancing between me and Dr. Brian. I knew what she was thinking. Her job at the wellness center, the mortgage they were already 2 months behind on. Dr. Brian was on the board. One word from him, and she'd be unemployed. Uncle Pete squeezed her hand, but I saw the calculation in her eyes. Red and blue lights filled the street. Someone had called for a welfare check. 2 officers approached, their faces neutral but alert. I clutched the credit card statements, weighing my options. Show them now and risk looking unstable, or wait to build something stronger. Dr. Brian stood perfectly still by the door, but his hand moved unconsciously to his neck, rubbing the spot where something might wrap around it, like fishing line. I made my choice. I handed the papers back to Aunt Sharon and walked talked calmly to the officers, explaining that I'd had a nightmare and ran to my uncle's house. Just a misunderstanding. Mom sobbed with relief, and Dr. Brian's shoulders relaxed. He was already typing on his phone as the officers guided me to their patrol car for the ride home. The drive was silent except for the radio chatter. I stared out the window, watching Uncle Pete's house disappear, knowing I'd just given Dr. Brian time to prepare, time to contact his lawyer about my concerning teenage delusions, time to file whatever paperwork he needed to paint me as unstable. Morning brought chaos. The school called about my failing grades while I sat at the kitchen table, listening to Mom apologize to the guidance counselor. The doorbell rang. Aunt Lisa from Phoenix, Mom's sister, arriving with 2 suitcases and a confused expression. Then the phone again. Dad's life insurance company needing final signatures today. I helped Aunt Lisa with her luggage, grateful for something normal to do. She hugged me tight, smelling like airplane coffee and her favorite vanilla perfume. As we walked to the guest room, I mentioned finding Dad's credit card statements. The words slipped out casually, but I saw Dr. Brian freeze in the hallway. He recovered quickly, offering to help sort through Dad's financial mess, his voice full of concern. 20 minutes later, I heard him retching in the downstairs bathroom. Mom and Aunt Lisa rushed to help, cooing over him as he mumbled about grief, about how hard it was treating families who'd lost someone when he'd lost his own wife to cancer. They rubbed his back while he gripped the toilet, his whole body shaking. My cousin Emma bounded down the stairs, all 13-year-old energy despite the early hour. She'd been staying weekends since Dad disappeared, keeping me company. She defended Dr. Brian immediately when she saw him sick, reminding everyone how he'd bought her the iPhone Mom couldn't afford, how he listened when the mean girls at school made her cry. Her loyalty stung. During the commotion, Dr. Brian's briefcase sat open in the hallway. I saw it from the stairs. Dad's journal, the leather one I'd given him for Christmas, visible in the side pocket. My feet moved without thinking, but I stopped at the master bedroom doorway. Taking it meant entering their room. Trespassing. Evidence obtained illegally wouldn't help anyone. The next day at school, Mrs. Chen caught me in the library, trying to access Dr. Brian's employee records on the computer. Her face went stern as she documented the incident, explaining she'd have to report this stalking behavior to my mother, another mark against my credibility. Dr. Brian's control expanded quickly. Dad's old boss called the house, needing Dr. Brian's signature to release Dad's final paycheck and pension paperwork. Somehow, Dr. Brian had become Mom's financial advisor and emergency contact. He signed the papers at our kitchen table while I watched, helpless. Mom confided in Aunt Lisa over coffee, building a narrative about my patterns of grief, how I'd refused to accept Grandma's death, how I got fixated when I was hurting. Aunt Lisa nodded sympathetically, shooting me worried glances. The family group chat became a minefield. My simple question about Dad's whereabouts got screenshot and forwarded to Dr. Brian's lawyer as evidence of harassment. I learned this when Mom showed me the email, tears in her eyes, begging me to stop hurting our family. Sophia's mom intercepted us at school pickup. She'd heard about my behavior at the PTA meeting, where Dr. Brian had expressed concern about my unhealthy fixation. She didn't want Sophia influenced by someone showing stalking tendencies. My best friend since 2nd grade looked at me apologetically as her mom drove away. Dr. Brian's reach extended everywhere. He controlled Dad's truck insurance and registration. He'd become my emergency contact at the orthodontist and therapist. I discovered this when the orthodontist's office called about a payment issue. Dad's autopay was still active on the supposedly canceled credit card. 3 nights without sleep caught up with me. Walking to school, I stumbled into a stop sign. My depth perception shot. The crossing guard, Mrs. Martinez, reported possible intoxication to the principal. Another mark on my record. Mrs. Chen had initially believed my concerns, but pressure from administration changed that. She called me in, explaining she wanted to help, but couldn't jeopardize her position. She had her own family to think about. The door closed with a soft click. Another ally gone. At the grocery store, I noticed people avoiding me. The cashier's phone screen showed a neighborhood Facebook post about the disturbed teen harassing her mother's grief counselor. My face burned as I paid for milk and bread, feeling eyes on me from every aisle. Dr. Brian's alibi materialized accidentally. His lie about attending a medical conference the night Dad disappeared aligned perfectly with a flight cancellation due to weather. The timestamp was public record. Pure luck that made him look truthful. Behind the school gym, Sophia found me during lunch. She needed Dr. Brian's recommendation letter for the elite swim team scholarship. He'd joined the selection committee through Mom's connections. She hated asking, but her future depended on it. I told her I understood, even as another piece of my support system crumbled. I spent hours at the county records office, finally finding proof that Dr. Brian's first wife hadn't died of cancer. She'd left him, citing emotional abuse in the divorce filing. But revealing this meant admitting I'd broken into his former neighbor's Facebook to track her down. Being right made me look more unstable. A neighbor photographed me outside the records office, catching the moment I smiled at finding the divorce papers. The image would later surface as evidence of my lack of genuine grief for my father. Context didn't matter anymore. The family dinner was tense. Dr. Brian suggested inpatient treatment for me, his voice full of manufactured concern. Mom nodded along, exhausted by the drama. Emma played with her food, uncomfortable with the conflict. Aunt Lisa stayed silent. Across the table, Dr. Brian and I locked eyes. We both understood the stakes now. This would end with one of us destroyed, and Christmas was only 3 weeks away. Neither of us could back down. The war had begun. Dr. Brian started spending more time with Aunt Lisa during her extended visit. They bonded over true crime podcasts in the living room while I watched from the kitchen doorway. He quoted Dad's favorite line from Shawshank Redemption during their first dinner together, and I saw Aunt Lisa's eyes light up with recognition. The manipulation was so calculated it made my stomach turn. A week later, Dr. Brian and I had a conversation in the hallway that we'd remember differently. I heard him say my father got what he deserved. The words sharp and final. He'd later claim he said my father got what he deserved. Peace at last. The addition of those 3 words changed everything, but only one of us was telling the truth. That night, I found something that shattered me. While searching through old emails on my laptop, I discovered texts I'd sent Dad 3 months before he disappeared. Messages complaining about his drinking, about how embarrassing he was at my school events. The worst one made me physically sick to read. I'd written that sometimes I wished he'd just disappear. Dr. Brian had somehow obtained these and submitted them to family court as part of a psychiatric evaluation request. My own words, twisted into evidence of instability. Emma started repeating things that made no sense. She told her teacher that I was too sick to visit Daddy the weekend he died, even though I'd never said that. When I confronted her, she looked confused and said, Dr. Brian had explained how I'd blocked out the memory because of trauma. She genuinely believed his version of events. While organizing the garage, I found our old tablet from when Emma was younger. The nanny cam in the hallway was still connected to cloud storage, footage, forgotten but functional. Scrolling through the footage, my hands started shaking. There was Dr. Brian, searching through my room while I slept, going through my drawers, reading my journal. The timestamp showed this happened multiple times over the past month. I brought the tablet to my meeting with the family court advocate, but she dismissed it as inadmissible. The court treated my accusations as trauma responses requiring immediate intervention. She recommended increased therapy sessions with Dr. Brian's colleague, Dr. Sarah Winters. The system designed to protect me was being used to silence me. After school, I used the public library's computer to access Dad's email before Dr. Brian could delete the account. His password was still saved in my browser from helping him with online banking last year. In his drafts folder, I found unsent emails that made my heart race. Dad had been researching how to legally record conversations in our state. His last search, according to the autocomplete function, was about one-party consent laws. Dr. Brian's ex-wife had a Pinterest board titled Surviving Narcissistic Abuse. I found it through her sister's Instagram, and it contained date-stamped photos of bruises. The dates matched conferences Dr. Brian had supposedly attended during their marriage. The pattern was clear. He'd hurt her and used work trips as cover stories. My grief counselor received a subpoena to testify about our sessions. Specifically, they wanted her to discuss my statements about wanting to make him pay and see him suffer like Dad did. Those words, spoken in the safety of therapy about my anger at Dad's drinking, were now being weaponized against me. I tried to record Dr. Brian's confession by provoking him in the kitchen. I set my phone on the counter thinking I was clever, but he spotted the recording app notification immediately. Instead of reacting with anger, he staged a concerned intervention, speaking calmly about my paranoid behavior while texting Mom about the incident. He maintained eye contact the entire time, his thumbs moving across his phone screen without looking down. The next week, Dr. Brian forgot to pick up Emma from school. The 3:15 p.m. deadline came and went, and the school called me since I was listed as her emergency contact. I had to abandon my meeting with Dad's best friend Marcus to race to the school, avoiding potential abandonment charges. Dr. Brian apologized profusely later, claiming a patient emergency, but I saw the satisfaction in his eyes. Mrs. Chen's support evaporated after an anonymous complaint threatened her teaching license. She called me into her office, tears in her eyes, explaining that she had 3 kids to feed and couldn't risk her career. The complaint accused her of inappropriate involvement in a student's family situation. We both knew who filed it. Living in the house became unbearable. Dr. Brian had fully inhabited Dad's presence, sleeping in his spot, wearing his weekend clothes, even using his special fishing cologne. The distinctive mix of Old Spice and lake water that used to comfort me now made me gag. He'd absorbed Dad's life like a parasite. During Sunday dinner, Dr. Brian made an offer. He'd take me to spread Dad's ashes at Lake Harrison if I apologized publicly for my behavior and entered voluntary psychiatric treatment. The offer was presented in front of Mom, Aunt Lisa, and Emma, making me look unreasonable when I refused. He recorded my angry response on his phone, documenting it as evidence that I was preventing the family from achieving closure and holding my mother's healing hostage to delusions. Everything I thought I knew shattered when I discovered I'd been wrong about the timeline. Going through the security footage again with fresh eyes, I realized Dad had disappeared on Friday, not Thursday. I'd been looking at the wrong door's camera feed. This didn't change Dr. Brian's lies, but it meant I'd been building my case on a flawed foundation. Mom's journal surfaced in the attic while I was looking for Christmas decorations. Her entries from last year revealed Dad had been planning to check into rehab. He'd been documenting his drinking patterns, attending AA meetings, preparing to get help. This complicated everything. It suggested Dad was trying to change, making his disappearance even more tragic. The motel charge I'd fixated on turned out to have an explanation. Through Marcus, Dad's AA sponsor, I learned Dad had paid for a room that morning because Marcus had been living in his car. The timestamp showed Dad was helping others even on what would be his last day. This act of kindness made his loss sharper, more real. Aunt Lisa faced an impossible choice. Dr. Brian threatened to ban her from seeing Emma if she continued supporting my investigation. She came to me at the park, tears streaming down her face, explaining she couldn't lose another family member. She'd stay neutral, keeping Emma's visits but limiting how much she could help me. I told her I understood, even as another ally slipped away. I started learning Dr. Brian's tactics, using them myself. I befriended his receptionist by pretending to need therapy recommendations for a friend with an abusive stepfather. She was sympathetic, sharing more than she should about Dr. Brian's schedule and habits. Manipulation felt dirty, but I was running out of options. Through LinkedIn, I found where Dr. Brian's ex-wife worked, a Whole Foods 2 towns over. I engineered an accidental meeting in the tea aisle, bonding over chamomile while memorizing the pattern of old bruises visible on her wrists. We discussed organic honey and healing herbs, while I cataloged evidence I could never use without revealing my stalking. Dad's cloud storage account was still active, the subscription on autopay. I downloaded 3 years of photos before Dr. Brian realized it existed. The images showed timeline inconsistencies in Dr. Brian's claimed locations, business trips that didn't match his calendar, conferences he never attended, small lies that added up to something bigger. Marcus emerged from the shadows, demanding the $5,000 Dad had promised him for staying sober. He showed up at the house during dinner, creating chaos. Mom was overwhelmed, trying to balance her grief, Dr. Brian's demands, and now Marcus's claims. The disruption gave Dr. Brian another opportunity to paint me as the source of family chaos. The cost of fighting 2 battles became clear when Emma had a severe anxiety attack at school. I was meeting with a lawyer about the timeline evidence and missed the nurse's call. By the time I arrived, Dr. Brian was already there, comforting Emma while the nurse documented that I'd been too involved in personal drama to help. Another mark against my character in official records. My college savings account drained quickly. Legal consultations, document fees, gas money for investigations, it all added up. Meanwhile, Dr. Brian used Dad's business credit cards for a romantic getaway with Mom to a resort in Sedona. The irony of him spending Dad's money while I spent my future wasn't lost on me. Dad's favorite fishing supply store became a battleground. I confronted Dr. Brian there about the credit card charges, hoping the public setting would protect me. Instead, our argument upset Mr. Harrison, the elderly owner who'd known Dad for 20 years. He asked us both to leave and not come back, banning us from the place that held so many memories of Dad. Another piece of him lost to this war. My part-time job at the mall ended when Dr. Brian's patient became my new manager. She deemed me too unstable for customer service after observing my exhausted state and documenting several minor mistakes. The replacement they hired was Dr. Brian's receptionist's daughter, the same receptionist I'd been cultivating as a source. School became my refuge and my prison. I slept in my car in the parking lot some nights, unable to bear being in the house while Dr. Brian renovated Dad's study into his home office. I watched through the window as he threw out Dad's lifetime of journals, calling them clutter that prevented healthy living spaces. Mom's breaking point came on a Thursday evening. She held Dad's urn while begging me to let Daddy rest in peace and stop torturing our family. Her exact words were that I was destroying us, not him. She threatened to cut off all financial support if I didn't stop my investigation. The urn shook in her hands as she sobbed, and I realized she was grieving not just Dad, but the family we used to be. My investigation had casualties. Ms. Rodriguez, my English teacher, was suspended when our after-school meetings were deemed inappropriate by the administration. She'd been helping me organize evidence, letting me use her classroom printer. Her daughter asked why Mommy couldn't teach anymore, and I had no answer that would make sense to a 7-year-old. Ms. Rodriguez's husband filed for separation 2 weeks later, claiming her involvement with an unstable student's conspiracy theories proved poor judgment around their own children. The domino effect of my actions spread beyond what I'd imagined possible, but stopping now would make her sacrifice meaningless, so I pressed on. Sophia found me in the library, asking a question that haunted me. What if you're wrong about everything? Her parents were threatening to send her to private school to escape my influence. I couldn't answer for 13 long seconds, the silence stretching between us like a chasm. The doubt she planted took root, growing with each passing hour. At a town hall about teen mental health, I made a desperate play for credibility. I publicly admitted to my sewer slide attempt from 2 years ago, explaining my current mental state was stable despite the family stress. Dr. Bryan watched from the panel, his face a mask of professional concern. My confession became another weapon in his arsenal, proof of my instability rather than my honesty. Dad's AA journal surfaced in a box of books Dr. Bryan had marked for donation. Reading it destroyed me. I'd missed Dad's 3-month sobriety celebration last spring because I was getting high with friends behind the gym. He'd written about his disappointment but also his understanding. He was trying so hard to get better, and I'd been too selfish to see it. Dr. Bryan's lawyer filed an emergency motion to move the custody hearing up by 2 months. My legal aid attorney was on maternity leave, and her substitute had 4 hours to prepare. Standing on the courthouse steps, I watched Dr. Bryan's legal team arrive in expensive suits, while my substitute lawyer shuffled through papers she'd barely had time to read. The investigation revealed something unexpected about Dr. Bryan's motivations. He'd genuinely loved Mom for years, since she first became his patient. His journals, subpoenaed during discovery, showed real anguish over her pain in her marriage, but mixed with that sympathy were fantasies about replacing Dad that dated back 2 years before the disappearance. Love twisted into obsession, help transformed into control. To prove Dr. Bryan saw an opportunity rather than creating one, I had to destroy Mom's image of her marriage. I revealed Dad's emotional affair with someone named Cheryl, breaking my promise to never tell Mom about the messages I'd found last year. Her face crumbled as I explained how Dr. Bryan would have known about the problems in their marriage through therapy, how he positioned himself as the solution. The person I used to be died during those months. The trusting, honest version of Megan was replaced by someone who documented everything, trusted no one, and always recorded conversations. I kept receipts for every interaction, saved screenshots of every text, backed up all evidence in multiple locations. Paranoia became survival. I manipulated Emma into revealing where Dr. Bryan kept his patient files by pretending to plan a surprise party for Mom. She excitedly showed me his home office setup, not realizing she was helping me locate evidence. Using a 13-year-old's trust felt like crossing a line I could never uncross. A small victory came when the judge granted me supervised visitation rights with Emma, but the hollow feeling persisted when I visited Dad's grave and found Dr. Bryan already there. We both brought Dad's favorite beer. Both cried at his headstone. The twisted mirror image of our grief made me realize we were both mourning different versions of the same man. Dr. Bryan's counterclaim gained traction when school security found a knife in my backpack. I'd started carrying it for protection, paranoid about being alone with him. The security footage of me being escorted to the principal's office spread through social media, painting me as dangerous rather than frightened. Everything hinged on Marcus's testimony about what Dad told him the night he disappeared. Marcus had been sober for 90 days, his longest streak in years. He held the key to everything, but his sobriety was fragile. The pressure of testifying, of revealing his last conversation with Dad, threatened to break him. I watched him struggle, knowing that pushing too hard might cost him everything he'd worked for. The courthouse hallway became our final battleground before testimony began. Dr. Bryan's nephew, who I'd tutored in algebra last year, asked why I was being mean to Uncle Bryan when I'd helped him pass math. The boy's innocent confusion was weaponized by the adults around him, his question repeated in front of the judge as evidence of my irrational vendetta. Dad's fishing buddies chose sides based on economics rather than loyalty. Those whose businesses relied on referrals from Dr. Bryan's wellness center testified about my erratic behavior at the bait shop. Others, who had nothing to lose, shared stories about Dad's fear in his final weeks. The community split along lines of financial dependence. The legal aid office delivered crushing news. Family court required clear and convincing evidence, not just reasonable suspicion, for emergency custody changes. Circumstantial evidence wasn't enough without proof of immediate danger. The system protected the status quo, and Dr. Bryan had positioned himself perfectly within it. Dad's favor with a forensic accountant finally paid off. The man owed Dad for saving his marriage years ago, and he agreed to analyze the financial records. But his help came with conditions. He'd found suspicious patterns but wouldn't testify without immunity from his own tax issues being discovered. Another ally constrained by their own secrets. The accountant's analysis revealed Dad knew about the affair. He'd been documenting evidence, preparing for divorce, protecting assets. Bank records showed he'd opened a separate account, started moving money. He was building a case, just like I was now. Dad's final email draft broke my heart. He'd been gathering proof of Dr. Bryan's ethics violations, documenting the relationship with Mom while she was still his patient. But he wanted to protect Mom from scandal, to find a way to extract her from Dr. Bryan's influence without destroying her reputation. He was trying to save us all. The safety deposit box key was hidden in Dad's tackle box, wrapped in a photo from our last fishing trip. The date of that trip was the code, something only I would know. Inside the box, I found everything. Photos of Dr. Bryan's car at our house during times he claimed to be at conferences, recordings of conversations. Dad had been building a case for months. The evidence painted a picture of Dad's last days. He lived in fear but stayed to protect me from a custody battle with an unstable mom under Dr. Bryan's influence. Every document was carefully organized, labeled with dates and explanations. Dad's methodical nature, which I'd always teased him about, now offered a path to justice. I made a choice that would define who I'd become. Instead of emotional accusations, I adopted Dad's approach. Methodical documentation, careful organization, irrefutable evidence presented without drama. I spent weeks preparing binders, creating timelines, cross-referencing every claim with supporting documents. Dr. Bryan's overconfidence led to his biggest mistake. In his therapy license renewal, he swore under penalty of perjury that he'd never treated family members. But Mom was still technically his patient when they started dating. The ethics violation was clear, documented, and impossible to dispute. I presented the evidence to the medical board without gloating or emotion, just facts, timelines, and documentation. Dr. Bryan's face went pale as he realized his license was gone. Years of education, his entire career, destroyed by his own arrogance and a single lie on a form. The momentum shifted rapidly. Ethics violations, financial impropriety, timeline inconsistencies, the pattern became undeniable. Law enforcement opened an investigation into Dad's disappearance. The state police took over from local authorities, bringing resources and objectivity to a case that had been buried in small-town politics. Both sides prepared for the final custody hearing. Mom was forced to choose between her daughter and her boyfriend. The community watched, waiting to see which side of the divide they'd ultimately fall on. The stakes couldn't be higher. My future, Emma's safety, and justice for Dad all hung in the balance. The forensic accountant's analysis painted a devastating picture. Dad had documented Dr. Bryan's pattern of visiting our house during therapy hours, billing insurance companies for sessions that never happened. The financial trail stretched back 18 months before Dad's disappearance. Each fraudulent claim meticulously recorded in Dad's handwriting, waiting in that safety deposit box like a loaded weapon. I spent the next 3 days organizing Dad's evidence into a comprehensive timeline. The bank's security footage showed Dad visiting the safety deposit box weekly in his final month, always carrying manila folders. He'd been preparing for war, gathering ammunition for a battle he'd never get to fight. Now it fell to me to finish what he started. The medical board meeting was scheduled for Tuesday morning. I arrived early, carrying 3 binders of evidence, each page protected in plastic sleeves. Dr. Bryan entered with his legal team, but I noticed the tremor in his hands as he adjusted his tie. The board members reviewed my documentation silently, their expressions growing more severe with each page. Dr. Bryan's defense crumbled when they cross-referenced his patient files with Dad's evidence. The dates aligned perfectly. While he claimed to be treating patients, security cameras showed his car at our house. While he billed for therapy sessions, Dad's photos proved he was having dinner with Mom. The pattern was undeniable and damning. The board's decision came swiftly. Dr. Bryan's license was suspended pending criminal investigation. His practice would be audited, every patient file reviewed. As he left the building, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I felt no satisfaction. This wasn't about winning anymore. It was about truth. Marcus finally agreed to meet me at the diner where Dad used to take him after AA meetings. His hands shook as he gripped his coffee cup, 93 days sober and counting. He pulled out a worn notebook, pages filled with dates and conversations. Dad had confided in him about Dr. Bryan's threats, about fearing for his safety. Marcus had kept quiet out of fear, but sobriety demanded honesty. The state police detective assigned to Dad's case was a woman named Detective Reyes. She reviewed the evidence with professional detachment, asking pointed questions about timelines and locations. When I showed her the recording Dad had hidden in the safety deposit box, her expression shifted. Dad's voice, clear and frightened, describing Dr. Bryan's escalating threats. The detective immediately issued a warrant. Dr. Bryan's arrest happened quietly on a Wednesday afternoon. No dramatic scene, no media circus. Just 2 officers arriving at the wellness center with a warrant for fraud and suspicion of manslaughter. Mom watched from the window as they led him to the patrol car, her face unreadable. Emma clung to her side, confused and scared. The search of Dr. Bryan's home office revealed more evidence. Hidden in a locked drawer, they found Dad's missing cell phone. The last text message, half-typed and never sent, simply read, "Bryan knows about the evidence." The phone's location data placed it at Lake Harrison the night Dad disappeared, then at Dr. Bryan's house every day since. Mom's breakdown came that evening. She collapsed in the kitchen, the same spot where she'd fallen when Dad first disappeared. This time, I caught her again, holding her as she sobbed out the truth she'd been hiding. She'd suspected Dr. Bryan's involvement but was too terrified to lose someone else. Her grief mixed with guilt created a toxic cocktail of denial. Aunt Lisa moved in temporarily, taking charge of the household while Mom struggled to process everything. She enrolled Emma in counseling, found a therapist for Mom who wasn't connected to Dr. Bryan's practice, and helped me navigate the legal system. Her steady presence kept our family from completely fracturing. The preliminary hearing revealed the full scope of Dr. Bryan's deception. Phone records showed he'd called Dad from a burner phone, arranging to meet at Lake Harrison to discuss the situation. Security footage from a gas station near the lake showed both vehicles heading in that direction. Dr. Bryan's story kept changing, each version more desperate than the last. Dad's fishing buddies came forward with information they'd been too scared to share. Dr. Bryan had been asking questions about the lake's depth, about currents and underwater obstacles. He'd claimed to be planning a memorial service, but now his interest took on a sinister cast. Each person's small piece of information created a larger, darker picture. The forensic team's search of Lake Harrison used new sonar technology. On the 3rd day, they found something. Not Dad's body, which the currents had likely carried away, but his tackle box, weighted down with rocks. Inside, waterlogged but still readable, was a letter to me. Dad's final words, written in haste, telling me he loved me and to take care of Mom. Dr. Bryan's ex-wife agreed to testify about his pattern of control and escalation. She flew in from Seattle, brave enough now to face him in court. Her testimony painted a picture of a man who couldn't handle rejection, who saw people as possessions. The bruises I'd memorized in the Whole Foods tea aisle became evidence of a dangerous pattern. Mom had to testify about their relationship, each word seemingly pulled from her throat. She admitted to the affair starting while she was still his patient, to ignoring red flags because she was drowning in grief. Her testimony was halting, filled with shame, but necessary. The truth, however painful, was better than Dr. Bryan's elaborate lies. Emma's testimony was taken privately, away from the courtroom's intensity. She told the judge about Dr. Bryan's questions, how he'd asked her to report on my behavior, promising rewards for information. She'd thought it was a game, a way to help our family. The manipulation of a child added another charge to his growing list. The trial moved quickly once Dr. Bryan's lawyer realized the mountain of evidence against him. A plea deal emerged, voluntary manslaughter, fraud, and ethics violations. 15 years in prison, loss of his medical license, and restitution to Dad's estate. It wasn't enough, would never be enough, but it was something. Sentencing day arrived with unexpected rain. Mom, Aunt Lisa, Emma, and I sat together in the courtroom, a united front forged through trauma. Dr. Bryan looked smaller in his orange jumpsuit, the confident facade completely shattered. When given the chance to speak, he rambled about love and loss, never quite accepting responsibility. I gave my victim impact statement with Dad's letter in my pocket. I spoke about the father stolen from us, the trust betrayed, the family torn apart by one man's obsession. But I also spoke about resilience, about truth prevailing, about Dad's meticulous nature saving us even after his death. The courtroom was silent when I finished. The judge's sentence was swift and final. 15 years, no possibility of early parole for 5. Restitution of $200,000 to Dad's estate. Permanent loss of medical license. As the bailiff led Dr. Bryan away, he looked back once. Mom turned away, but I met his gaze steadily. He'd taken Dad from us, but he hadn't broken us. The wellness center closed within a month, Dr. Bryan's reputation destroying the practice. His colleagues distanced themselves. Former patients sought new therapists. The building stood empty, a monument to how one person's evil could poison everything around them. The community slowly adjusted to the truth they'd been blind to. Mom started genuine therapy with a counselor Aunt Lisa had researched thoroughly. The process was slow, painful, filled with setbacks. She had to confront not just her grief over Dad, but her role in enabling Dr. Bryan. Some days were harder than others, but she kept going. For Emma, for me, for herself. I returned to school, no longer the pariah who'd accused a respected doctor. Some relationships couldn't be salvaged. Sophia's family never apologized and we remained strangers. But others surprised me. Mrs. Chen reached out, expressing regret for not supporting me. Ms. Rodriguez returned to teaching, and we exchanged knowing nods in the hallway. Emma struggled with the truth about Dr. Bryan, the man who'd bought her things and listened to her problems. Her therapist helped her process the manipulation, to understand that his kindness had been a tool. She kept the iPhone but deleted his number, a small act of reclaiming her agency. The financial aftermath was complex. Dad's life insurance finally paid out once the criminal case confirmed Dr. Bryan's guilt. The restitution would come slowly, but it helped restore my college fund. Mom sold Dr. Bryan's belongings from the house, donating the proceeds to the local domestic violence shelter. Uncle Pete and Aunt Sharon became regular fixtures again. The fear of Dr. Bryan's influence finally lifted. Sunday dinners resumed, quieter than before but genuine. We shared stories about Dad, keeping his memory alive through small moments and shared laughter. The empty chair remained, but it no longer felt like an accusation. Marcus stayed sober, his testimony having freed him from the secret that threatened his recovery. He became a regular at family gatherings, sharing stories about Dad from AA that we'd never heard. His presence was a living reminder of Dad's kindness, even in his final days. The house slowly transformed back to ours. Dr. Bryan's Mediterranean spices were replaced with Dad's favorite seasonings. His expensive artwork came down, replaced by family photos. Mom found Dad's flannel shirt hidden in my closet, and instead of anger, she hugged me. We framed it, hanging it in the hallway where Dad's jacket used to live. On the anniversary of Dad's disappearance, we held the memorial service I'd originally planned. His fishing buddies came, sharing stories and tears by Lake Harrison. We scattered wildflower seeds where his boat was found, creating something beautiful from tragedy. Mom held my hand as we said goodbye properly. The following months brought a new normal. Mom returned to work part-time, finding purpose beyond grief. Emma joined the school's peer counseling program, using her experience to help others. I focused on my grades, salvaging what I could of junior year. We weren't the same family, but we were still a family. 6 months after the trial, Mom and I returned to Lake Harrison with Dad's ashes. Emma played on the shore, her laughter mixing with the sound of waves. Mom finally spoke the words she'd been unable to say, that she'd suspected the truth but was too afraid of losing another person she loved. I told her I understood. Fear and grief could make people do impossible things. We spread Dad's ashes as the sun set, watching them disappear into the water he'd loved. Mom whispered an apology to the wind, to Dad, to me. I held her hand, feeling the weight of everything we'd survived. Justice had been imperfect, but achieved. Our family was broken but healing. Dad was gone but not forgotten. The water lapped at our feet, and for the first time in over a year, I felt something close to peace.